I'm Nancy Wren. I'm on the board of the Historical Society, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of the schools in Mount Holly. Over here on our board, it says that the early 1700s to early 1800s, children were educated at home on farms. First individually, then as groups at centrally located farms. So Robert Beatty's home, located near the Tuckasegee Ford, was used as a schoolhouse as early as 1781. In the 1800s, there were several one-room schoolhouses were constructed to serve the local children. These schools often bore the names of the landowners on which they were constructed. These schools were supported by the state for 4 months of the year, and children who did not attend one of the state-supported schools attended a paid school. And there's a little list of some here. Churches like the Macedonia Baptist Church near Lucia taught African American children. The first school building for African American children was built in the 1930s, and it was called the Mount Holly Colored School. So in 1902, a bond election resulted in the opening of a graded school in 1903, Mount Holly's first multi-room school building. It had 2 stories, it had 10 classrooms, and it was located on North Main Street near the current location of the First Methodist Church. And this is a picture of it right up here. And you can see how the teachers here and the children are lined up going into the school. So it is known that there have been some one-room schoolhouses in Mount Holly. Some of these schoolhouses had maybe just one room. They had like a bench that went all around the edge of the room, and that was where they, sort of like this, where they had that was their desk. They didn't have normal desks like we see now. And then they had just a little bench that they sat on. And they had a fireplace. The teacher had just a small desk area and a stool to on, and then there were several grades in there. She would be teaching children of all ages. There was not much furniture in there, and of course there was no plumbing, so you had to go to the woods for toileting purposes. So that's the very beginning of the schools. This was the next school that would be on Main Street. And then if we come over here, the first building of the Mount Holly School looked like this building here. It was built in 1910. It was the first of 3 buildings that would be on that lot where Ida Rankin School is now. The second and third buildings were built, one in 1916 and the other in 1923. This is an aerial view of it, and you can see the 3 buildings here. And then this portion was added on to the first building at a later date. So these 3 buildings I actually went to school in. The first building had first and second grade. The addition that I talked about here was where I went to first grade. There was no kindergarten then. The second building, which was the middle building, the lower level had the big cafeteria, and the children from each building had to come outside, go into the middle building to eat. The cafeteria was home cooked food, cooked on site, nothing brought in. Had the best yeast rolls. They just had soup day. Our teacher would teach us the correct way to eat soup. How you would move the spoon this way and back to your mouth, the correct way. And so teachers were teaching even at lunchtime. But the food was really good. And nobody went home hungry, that was for sure. And I know that because my mom used to work in the cafeteria. So we knew what went on in there. The third building had third and fourth graders in it, and the principal's office was over there when I was in that building. Then the top level of the middle building was fifth grade, and I remember that building because it was way up high. When we had fire drills, there was an old iron fire escape that went down the side of the building. We didn't go down our normal steps. When the fire bell rang, we had to go out that little tiny entrance down there. So let's see. We'll move on over here because there were more schools in Mount Holly, and the newer Mount Holly School was built. So over here we have, let's see, this is the school where we're talking about the Black American School. It was called the A.M. Rollins School. It was renamed, of course, and then following the decision in 1954 and the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, A.M. Rollins had to close because at that point in time, the African American children were put in the public schools with the white children. So the desegregation began in the schools in the mid-1960s. And I remember that because I was in the 6th grade when that happened. Let's see. The Mount Holly High School, the first one that was built was in 1927. This was the first Mount Holly High School. It was built on Hawthorne Street. When I went to school, that ended up being the middle school or the junior high school. It was eventually torn down and they built a new high school, Mount Holly High School, which now is the middle school. So they tore this building down. But there were some buildings across the street from this building that were used as a home ec room. We had an auditorium across there, and then the gym for the basketball gym and the band room was across the street. Those buildings are still up. I don't know if they use the auditorium or the other buildings or not, but now the gym, of course, is used for Mount Holly recreation. So those buildings are still here. So let's see. This is talking about the Mount Holly Auditorium. That was built in 1952. The Costner Field, which is named after a man, I can't remember his first name, was completed in 1953. That's where we had all our football games, and that was a Friday night tradition. The whole town would come out for the football games. So that field now is used for the middle school. So then in 1972, East Gaston High School was built. That's when the two towns, Stanley and Mount Holly, came together. They both go to East Gaston High School. I was in the first graduating class of that school, so it's over 50 years old already. And so that was the new high school. Let me talk about the Lucia School over here, because this school was an elementary school that was located up on 16 if you go out to 73. The first two Lucia elementary schools existed before 1875. Each one was one room building with an open fireplace and seats made of wooden slabs. Drinking water was carried in a bucket from a nearby spring. Now here's one, Lucia School in 1913. Here's some of the student body, a picture of them in the 1913. But look over here at 1898, what the folks looked like that go to school there. They, I think, eventually had an auditorium that was constructed near Snow Hill Methodist Church. Gasoline mantle lamps were used to provide artificial light, and eventually a lavatory with a drinking fountain was installed in the room. In the 1880s, because the second building burned down, the Piney Grove School was built. And it was a one-room heated with a wood-burning stove, had seats similar to church pews, and a portion of the wall was painted black and used for the blackboard. Okay, let's see. And here's a picture of first and second graders. There was a teacher called Alma Thompson. This was from 1920 to 1930. Even in 1895, Robert Connell taught in a new one-room school located where the Lucia teacherage now stands. And here's a picture of that, the Lucia teacherage. So all the district schools were consolidated by 1928, and buses were introduced. So children no longer had to walk as far as 3 miles to school anymore. And these elementary children went through 8th grade, and then they came to Mount Holly, to the Mount Holly schools. So the history of the Mount Holly schools was very important to the town, because as the town grew, more population, more schools were built. I wanted to point out we had a teacherage here in Mount Holly. It opened in 1923 on land purchased from the Hutchinson family. The brick building had 15 decorated rooms, and it was an attractive option for new teachers needing a place to live and being in walking distance to the school in Mount Holly. There's some of the teachers that were listed here that actually lived there. Some were single women, but they did have couples occasionally, and they used a community kitchen that had rooms, and then there was a kitchen there. So it operated until the 1950s, and then it was empty for a while until it was torn down in 1972, and then that's when Ida Rankin was built. So they, I guess, acquired the land for that. I don't know. So it was located right below where Ida Rankin was. You could just walk up the sidewalk and go to school, teach. This is an old, I don't know if you can get a close-up, it's very old. It is a report card from Mount Holly High School. It was from Jim Tucker. It's dated September the 12th, 1921. It's a little tattered and torn, but that's what they looked like back then. Here's a picture of some Mount Holly students in 1917. And this was a replica of the 1916-17 The Holly, which was Mount Holly's first school newspaper that was published. Subscription rates were 25 cents a year. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, let's see. I was going to show some things that were in here, the history of our schools. These are all some of the little school books, the pictures, annuals, I guess, what you would call. We have some that are very old, but those are in here. There's this was famous for some reason back in the day when they would put some books together. They would be wooden. I don't know the reason for that. But this was from an English teacher, and even my mother had a poem in here. I looked through it and didn't even know it. But back in the day when she went to high school, there was her English teacher was teaching, the different kinds of poems, how you can write them. And then there's stories in here too that they wrote. So the poems that my mom wrote, it was one of the poems where you tell the story, give some facts, and then by the end you're supposed to know who you're talking about. And so when I read it, I knew that she was talking about my grandmother, my mother, her mother. So that was the coolest thing. All right. I don't know if you know about the Mahoscos, was the little paper for the high school. And we have one as early as 1943 in here. The Mahosco, this is not the one I was going to show you, because this is the one that's like typed on a typewriter, okay? So it looks like this. The reason it's called Mahosco is it's M-O for Mount, H-O for Holly, S-C-O for school. That's how they got their name, Mahosco. So you can tell it's written on a, this is very old, typed up with a typewriter. And we've got some of those from all the way to like the 82s. So they changed every year. And it was always fun to read it because it was like what was going on in the school. Who was seeing who and writing this and that about the fun things that were happening in school. Okay, so let's see what's in there. We do have a collection of every high school, you know, every now and again has a reunion. And sometimes they, like this one from 1951, class, they made a little booklet, and so they donated that. So we have several things with pictures in them for some of the high school reunions that might be interesting for those who went to high school. And you'll notice the desk here are all different kinds and sizes. All of these desks came from the old Mount Holly schools. I don't know which schools and whatever. And then, of course, the chalkboard that each child might use whenever they were practicing their writing or maybe their math. These desks were used, they had runners and they would attach to the one in front of them. So you can see this is just the desk part, and then there would be another part sitting here. They all work differently. The desks you put your books in the bottom of some of them. Some of them you put in the top up here. Some of them you don't have much to put anywhere over there. So, let's see. I just wanted to point out this book is an old pupil's book. It's the history of the United States. The copyright is 1895. It belonged to William J. Springs. He was born in 1894 and graduated from Mount Holly School in 1911. He practiced dentistry on Main Street over Summey's drugstore from 1917 to 1940. So that is a really neat book to look. This is a book. It's one of our first readers. It was a sight and phonics book, phonetic reading. And it has lessons in here. And if you look closely, you can see that if you know your short vowel sounds and your long vowel sounds, they are marked with the appropriate little symbol. And then if you had a silent letter, that's marked out. And that's how the children were taught to read with phonics. And I think this one, was 1908. So, I don't know. So that one's cute. Now, most people don't write in cursive writing anymore, but way back in the day, they had a writing book. And this book taught you exactly how to sit in the proper position to write, to hold your pencil, And then there's lessons of exactly how to make each letter and a drill session. So there's over 100 lessons in here on how to form the letters of the alphabet in cursive writing. It even has numbers out here, 0 to 9. So that was very interesting. Of course, now I don't think kids learn how to write in cursive, because my grandson had a choice to sign a petition, and he wrote his name, and then there's always a place to write your name in cursive. He said, I can't sign this because I don't know how to write in cursive. So times change over the time. So over here we have a collection of annuals from the schools. The Mount Holly School Annuals, high school, date back to 1930. And then all the way to Mount Holly in 72, when of course it started to be East Gaston then. So they were called the Mount Holly Hawks. And it's just amazing that the 1930 one was a Mount Holly Hawk, and all the way up here in the 70s it still was called the Holly Hawk. And then East Gaston, we have a collection of those here. And then these are some Mount Holly Junior High annuals. They were a little bit smaller, so we have a few of those. This is an Scholastic Awards plaque from Mount Holly High School from grade 9, 10, and grade 11. This was back in the 60s, so if you come and look at this and you were in school back then, you'll recognize a lot of these names on there. That was the smart people. Okay. This little machine was one that you could put a quarter in, push this lever, and your pencil would come out here if you didn't have a pencil to write with that day. So that's a neat little machine. These are some of our principals along the way. This was a superintendent in 1930s, and this is Reverend F.B. Rankin. He was principal in 1930s. This is Andrew Rollins, the black school was named for. Then we have a superintendent here in the 1940s. One of the principals I remember, Laxton Hamrick and Brian Craig, they were high school principals. And Alan Craig was our elementary principal for a long time. He was my principal when I went to school there. And then one of our teachers, Scott Griffin, who is still teaching today at Ida Rankin, this is his 51st year. And in 1966, he was the North Carolina Teacher of the Year. So he really loves teaching. I don't know if he'll ever give it up. This is an old typewriter. If you've never seen one, I don't know how old or if there's a date on it or anything. I know we always, when I was in high school, took typing on the old, manual typewriters. But this is definitely older than that. So this is when the Mount Holly High School got its charter for the Beta Club. And this is dated February in 1935. So I thought that was pretty interesting. This, of course, is an old chalkboard that hung on the wall, and it has some of the letters, the cursive letters that you would be writing. And we have a little collection that's under these cabinets of scrapbooks about the schools, and each one, is a little different. This one's older because it's got this wooden backing, and of course the pages are yellow. But it was made, I thought, very decorative. How they, laid out a classroom. There's the projection room, I guess, where they could, I don't know if you saw movies on it or what. Man's achievements through the ages. And then I guess this is what the room looked like, the desk at that time. And then they had sports, you know, just anything these were drawn, so I thought that was pretty neat. And this one, of course, and a lot of the others that we have, had articles from the paper about their school, you know, maybe what happened that year. This was the year, let's see, I think it was on the back here, 56 to 57. So this one, let's see what I don't know if it said or not. Maybe the first page. 57. So anyway, we have several of those in cabinets over there too. And this clock, if we can show you, was one of the clocks that was in the elementary school in Mount Holly. I'm not sure exactly where, but I'm thinking it might have been in the principal's office somewhere. And you'll notice it's painted the same green as that bookshelf over there. And it came out of the Mount Holly schools too. This is one of the posters up here that of the Dick and Jane school books, reading books that we used to use. And let's see. Oh, and I wanted to mention the slide rule. Let's see. I wanted to show you the slide rule up here, which is it's like an analog computer that was invented in the 17th century. It can be used for multiplication, division, and more complicated calculations. The use of the slide rule ended, though, quickly in the 1970s, but it would slide out. But we've got a little nail there, so I guess to keep people from doing it back and forth. Then as we grew, Pinewood School was built in '69. That's another elementary school. And then Catawba Heights School was built in '59. So still we're branching out, even in when East Gaston, some of our students from high school go to Stuart Cramer School now, Stuart Cramer High School. So we're spreading out even beyond the town. This desk used to belong to Glenda Rollins. She was a first-year teacher at the Mount Holly High School, and the one that's presently now the middle school. She said they had the opportunity, since the school was new that year that she started, to have an old desk from the old Mount Holly School, or they could have one of the new desks, and she opted to get one of the old ones. And so she donated this last year. This desk is kind of unique. She did have to clean it up a little bit or whatever, but it has this place in the middle that folds down for your typewriter. And when you didn't need your typewriter anymore, you could pull this handle up and it would come up and then be even with the desk, so you'd have more desk room. So I was going to stick in some drawers. It has 3 drawers on each side. But she said later on that some of the other teachers were very jealous because her desk was much bigger than the new ones that they had ordered. So that's really cool. And I think I've pretty much gone all around everything. We do have a book over here that lists a lot of the teachers that taught in Mount Holly School and their pictures. Let's see how far it starts back. Goes back to, well, 1961. Put that back in. And it gives their name and their picture, what they looked like back then. This was my 2nd grade teacher right here, Miss Davenport. She was taught in the 3 big buildings that we were talking about. And let's see how far back it goes. See, we have colored pictures now. Oh goodness, it's kind of gotten used, so I don't know where the last date would be. But this is saying 86, 87, 88. And this says 1990, I think, and 1989, 90. So, and then I don't know if they do it anymore, keep a book like this, but it would be wonderful to have all the teachers in our schools. So we're always trying to add more history. So I think that's pretty much it. So better come on down to the museum and see what we got.